Here is your question number 4 on the screen. Why don't you hit pause, answer the question, and then join me for a discussion? All right. So I hope that you are through with it. Let's go ahead and read it. Although the earliest surviving Greek inscriptions written in an alphabet date from the 8th century BC. So we are talking about the earliest surviving pieces of writing by Greeks, and the earliest surviving writing was found in 8th century BC. A strong case can be made that the Greeks actually adopted alphabetic writing at least 2 centuries earlier. So that's a claim, that's a conclusion. Huh? When you say a strong case can be made for this, then this has to be the conclusion here. Let's read further. Significantly, the text of these earliest surviving Greek inscriptions sometimes runs from right to left and sometimes from left to right. Okay. Now the Greeks learned alphabetic writing from the Phoenicians, and in the process, they would surely have adopted whatever convention the Phoenicians were then using with respect to the direction of writing. Originally, Phoenician writing ran in either direction, but by the 8th century BC, it had been consistently written from right to left for about 2 centuries. Okay, all right. So, what do we know? Greeks learned alphabetic writing from the Phoenicians. And then the author says they would surely have adopted. So, it is what you typically call a conjecture, a guess, a surmise. That अच्छा Phoenicians ने जो किया वही इन्होंने भी किया होगा, so they would surely have adopted whatever convention the Phoenicians were then using with respect to the direction of writing. And then Phoenicians wrote from right to left and then from right to left, but thereafter by 8th century BC they consistently started writing from right to left for about 2 centuries, right? So this particular piece of information, what does this exactly do for us? It gives us an additional factor that helps us support this conclusion that hey, they must have been writing for at least 2 centuries prior to that. Why? Because they copied Phoenicians. Phoenicians at times wrote from right to left, at times wrote from left to right, and the same trait is found in the Greek writing as well. On top of it, they were writing right to left, left to right in a random order prior to 8th century BC. So if Greek texts have that right to left, left to right dichotomy, they must have been produced prior to 8th century BC, because after that they were consistently writing from right to left. So essentially, this is our conclusion. This is something that goes on to support the conclusion. Let's go ahead and look at the options. A, the first is the position that the argument seeks to establish. Yes. The second reports a discovery that has been used to support a position that the argument opposes. No, it is in fact being used to support the conclusion of the argument. So A gets ruled out. B, the first is the position that the argument seeks to establish. Yup. The second presents a speculation on which the argument relies. So does it support? Yes. Is it a speculation? Remember, it's basically when you say they would surely have, it's a guess. A guess can be termed as a speculation. It does support it. So relies, yes. So this looks to be a front runner, but let's go ahead and check C. The first presents evidence that is used in support of the position that the argument seeks to establish. No, the first is not evidence. The first is the position, right? Evidence is this part is evidence, this part is evidence, right? This is obviously not evidence, so we can rule it out. D, the first is an objection raised against a position that the argument opposes. So is this an objection raised against a position? No, there is no claim stated here that says that, hey, they started writing from 8th century. No, what we have here is the earliest surviving is from 8th century. There is nobody here claiming that, no, they started writing only from 8th century onwards. So we have a problem here. Then the second is the position that the argument seeks to establish. It is not the position, it is something that supports the author's position. In other words, what D says is that the second boldface is a conclusion, when in reality it is not a conclusion, it is basically a premise. So you can rule out D. E, the first is an objection raised. Okay, we've already established this, that D and E are identical in this regard. So same thing is applicable to the first half. Second, the second is evidence that has been used to support that position. So the second half here is right, but the first half that says first is an objection raised against a position, no. There is no position cited here that the author is contradicting, and therefore E can also be eliminated. So our best answer will be option B. So that's your question 4. Here is the next one. So here is question number 5 on the screen for you. So why don't you go ahead, pause the video right here, answer the question, and then come back for a discussion. Ready? Let's go. So computer companies whose warranties cover accidental damage such as a broken screen caused by dropping a laptop receive 3 times as many requests for fixing accidental damage as computer companies whose warranties do not cover such damage. So basically, this sentence goes ahead and compares 2 different companies with each other. There is a company that offers cover for accidental damage, which basically means that in case your device, your laptop accidentally gets damaged, they will repair it free of charge. Whereas there are companies that do not offer such a cover. So the ones that offer that cover, they receive 3 times as many requests for fixing accidental damage as compared to the other company. Okay, so that's basically what, that's information. It is impractical to track every user in enough detail to determine all factors that contributed to the accidents that caused the damage. So it is true that we cannot determine whether excessive carelessness was a factor. So here is some information. Now, why are these people damaging their product? We cannot determine that it is because of carelessness. Why can't we determine that? Because it is impractical to track every user in great detail to figure that out. However, these facts are not adequate to prove that 2/3 of such accidents are caused by excessive carelessness, despite what some have claimed. So basically, there are some people who go on to claim that, now see, 3 times as many requests. So for example, company A that offers a cover receives 90 requests. Company B that does not offer such a cover receives 30 requests. So A is receiving 60 additional requests, 2/3 more requests for fixing the accidental damage. So some people say that these extra 60 instances are caused by excessive carelessness. It's because people know that they have this cover, they don't care. They may throw their laptop on the bed instead of putting it down gently, right? But the author here says that these facts, the ones that are given above, the fact that there are 3 times as many requests, the fact that we cannot really determine whether carelessness was a factor. So he says these facts are not adequate to prove this claim. So these facts basically dispute the claim. Obviously, when company warranties do, and why do they not cover this? When company warranties do not cover accidental damage, customers do not have as much reason to request repairs from the same companies from which they bought their computers. So for instance, now imagine if I have a, let us say, a TV which is under warranty and something happens to it, I will go to the company and I'll ask them to fix it. But if my TV is out of warranty and something happens to it, will I necessarily contact the company? No, I may call my friendly neighborhood repair guy and ask him to come and fix it. So what the author here says is that merely because the number of claim requests here are low does not mean that the damages here are also, the number of damages is also low. They may not be reaching out to the company because the company is not going to really cover it. So they may go elsewhere and get it fixed. So to say that these additional accidents are caused by carelessness, no. So if I look at this entire argument and paraphrase it, well, there are some companies that cover accidental damage. They receive they receive thrice as many complaints for fixing their device as compared to companies that do not. Now, on the basis of it, some people say that, hey, companies that offer accidental cover, cover for accidental damage, people using their products are careless. because they know it will be covered, they don't bother. And that is the reason behind those extra damages. The author here says that, na, yaar, dekho, first up, you cannot even figure out whether carelessness has caused it. And second, merely because the number of claims for the companies that do not cover accidental damage, merely because the number of claims is low, it does not automatically imply that the number of damages was also low. It is just that they may not go to the company, they may go elsewhere. So here are these two bold parts. Let's start reading. The first is evidence. Information, yes, the validity of which the argument disputes. Does the argument dispute that these companies do not receive 3 times as many requests for fixing accidental damage? No. So this is ruled out. So let's eliminate. Let's look at the second half too. The second is a conclusion for which that evidence is offered as support. No. B. The first is evidence that supports a position with which the argument agrees. It is evidence. The second is that position. No. Is it supporting this position that these extra 2/3 are that they receive thrice as many requests for fixing? Therefore, when companies warranties, now they don't really have a premise conclusion relationship. So you can rule it out. C. The first is a claim on which a conclusion is based. Yes, this is a claim on which some people say the conclusion that the extra number is because of excessive carelessness, which the argument supports with additional evidence. No, this conclusion that this has been used by some people to arrive at this conclusion. Okay, but then does the author agree with this conclusion? No. So to say that the author supports it will be wrong. D. The first is a finding, the interpretation of which is the subject of the argument. In a way, yes, it's a finding, it's information, yes. Some people have interpreted it as carelessness is causing the accidents. And the second is a claim disputing the certainty of one possible interpretation. Absolutely, yes. So there are some people who say that these extra accidents prove, extra requests for fixing accidental damages prove that people are careless. That's what is causing it. But the author says that's not the case. Even when they don't have a cover, the accidents are happening. It's just that they're not getting reported. So D is correct. E. The first is a finding, the accuracy of which is in discussion throughout the argument. Are we discussing whether this is true or not? Nobody is disputing it. Everybody agrees that yes, company A gets 3 times more requests for fixing the damage than company B. We are not disputing it, so even this goes away. So our best answer is going to be option D. So with that, let's dive into our next question. Once again, why don't you pause the video right here, answer the question, and then come back for our discussion. Ready? Let's go. So the meltdown in the Arctic is speeding up, and as a result, the North Pole could be ice-free within 5 years instead of 60 years' time as earlier predicted. So what are we talking about? We are basically information, right? Meltdown in Arctic is speeding up, and earlier people thought that it will take 60 years for that ice to vanish. Now we are saying that okay, it will happen in just 5 years. This is based on computer studies of satellite images that reveal that ice at North Pole melted at an unprecedented rate recently. The disappearance is said to have exceeded the record loss of more than 1 million square kilometers in 2007 as global warming tightens its grip. So basically, this is a conclusion based on this evidence. So here's an evidence. Looking at this evidence, we concluded that it will vanish in 5 years. It's just an extrapolation from that data, right? The crucial point is that ice is clearly not building up enough over winter to restore cover, and that when you combine current estimates of ice thickness with the extent of the ice cap, you get a very clear indication that the Arctic is going to be ice-free in 5 years. So basically, here is a conclusion. This conclusion is based on this piece of evidence, and then we are adding another premise, another piece of information that goes on to support that yes, it is going to vanish in 5 years instead of 60. What is that other piece now? So we are losing ice, but what if you are also making new ice to compensate for it? So this says, but you're not able to compensate. And then if you look at the current estimates of ice thickness, extent of the ice cap, then you will indeed lose it in 5 years. So we once again, there is a reiteration of that conclusion. So let's start. A, the first is an apprehension against some belief. Is it a concern against some belief? No. This is a problem here. It does go against some prediction, but the prediction and belief are two different things. The second is the conclusion based on that apprehension. No. The second is the premise for the conclusion. It is not the conclusion by itself, at least not the first half. Okay, then B, the first is a prediction based on some evidence. True that. The second is that evidence. No, it is based on this evidence, the satellite imagery. This is additional premise. I mean, even if I remove the second boldface, the argument can still be made, because why? Because it still contains that evidence. So the second is that evidence. No, it is extra piece of information. Yes. C, the first is the conclusion. Yep. The second is the assumption on which the conclusion is based. Assumption? No, it is not assumption. Assumption is something that you're guessing. I mean, we know that in critical reasoning, one way of defining assumption is unstated premise, but it obviously, because it is stated, we are not using that definition here. So the other definition of assumption will be that there is something that you're guessing, but here it is not a guess, and therefore to call this an assumption will be incorrect. So we have actually managed to rule out A, B and C. D, the first is an apprehension against some belief. Once again, that same problem that A had. The second is an explanation in support of that apprehension. It does support it, but then again, this belief part is a problem. So let's keep it in the running. Maybe we find something better, who knows. The first is a prediction, very clearly yes. The second is the explanation on which the prediction is based. Yes. It is an explanation, yes. So the difference between B and E is that in B we called it the evidence on which it is based. It is based on this evidence, but this definitely is acting as an additional piece of information that acts as premise. So what is that explanation? You're losing ice, but you're not building enough to cover it up. So you will. So we'll probably be we'll run out of that ice on North Pole in what, 5 years? So yeah, definitely yes. So the best answer for us here is going to be option E. So that's your question number 6.